Well, now, according to the irrigators here, they'll have to make cuts of between 25 and 35%. Now, that's not been well received by both the politicians and the irrigators. In a moment, we'll go to the Riverland. But first, here's what the Premier, Mike Rann, had to say late today.
Our initial look, we believe that the report fails to properly acknowledge the huge work done by irrigators in South Australia since the late 1960s. Because South Australia set the cap. South Australia set the standard. It was South Australian irrigators and working with the then governments that stopped open culverts, stopped floodplain irrigation. And so what we want to see is that huge prior effort recognised when it comes to the allocations. We don't want to see bad behaviour rewarded.
And now to the Riverland to hear from the irrigators who the Premier says should be rewarded for their work. Simon Royal joins us to give the reaction from Renmark.
Well, thanks, Ian. You might remember just before the last federal election in August, we came here to the Riverland to speak with Ben Haslett, whose family have grown mandarins and oranges and citrus fruit and table grapes and stone fruit and almonds on their property for almost 3 decades now. The thing that he said to us then was that the delay in releasing the plan, the uncertainty, was crippling people. Well, we're back on the banks of the river now, here at Renmark. Ben Haslett from the River Communities is with us. Ben, have you got your certainty?
We haven't yet got the certainty, we've got a range. And I guess the MDBA think it's a starting point, but I must say, it's a big range, and it's also a very large amount of water from our community.
Is South Australia being asked to cut at the same rate as other states?
On the face of it, and obviously you've got to appreciate we've only just had a look, it appears so. And that in itself is a little surprising, given the historically responsible behaviour that this state's exhibited with regard to the adoption of state-of-the-art irrigation methods and excellent returns per megalitre of water used.
Does that mean in lay language that a cut here of 27% or 25% disproportionately hurts people here more? Because you use less water, there's less fat.
It is like that, Simon, because when you've got state-of-the-art irrigation systems, you don't have the same room for movement if you've got, for example, an open channel. So if people already moisture monitor and have drip irrigation, the thing to cut is production.
Now, you speak on behalf of a range of organisations. What about with other businesses? A cut here of 25 to 35%, what's it going to do?
That's a massive cut, and it represents several $100 million out of our communities. Now, if you think about it, if you take 30 or 40% of an income-producing asset out of any community, say Sydney, for example, do you think that city would operate the same way? Or 30 or 40% of the fuel out of your car? No chance. So that's a massive flow-on effect we'll have throughout our communities in South Australia. And it won't just affect irrigators. This is about whole regional communities. It will affect shops. It will also affect homeowners and the value of their places. So it's a really massive flow-on effect.
When people are bought out of an industry, when they leave, do they leave the community?
Yeah, it depends what's left. And once again, we've got an area that is absolutely fantastic for doing what we do. If you take 30 or 40% of the income-producing asset, there's not much left for those people to do.
No, but also if you buy people out and give them compensation, that's for the people involved in that industry. If they leave the area, and that's what I'm asking, they take the money with them, do they tend to leave the area?
People can. I mean, and what you worry about there is losing the critical mass of all those ancillary services that you'd otherwise have, whether it's schools, doctors, lawyers, all those things, plus all the other businesses. Well, once you get a certain critical mass that's left, then your town, and in fact regional Australia, has a real problem.
This is just a guide, so we're going to argue about this for the next year or so. What's your feeling on how interstate will react to this?
Obviously, all communities will be putting forward similar arguments, because any way you look at it, those sort of cuts are massive. So all the communities will have arguments that they put forward on that basis about the viability of their communities. Different communities will have different options. Some communities might have a broad acre option as well, and they don't necessarily have to rely quite so much on the irrigation water. These communities, which have been built over the last 100 years, have been focused almost solely on irrigation water and make decisions based on that high security water, 25 to 30 year ahead decisions.
Ben Haslett, thanks for joining us on State Line.
It's a pleasure.